Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying Volume 13, which is titled Generosity. We're going to be studying chapters 71 through 80 today. This is the second to last class before we restart from the very beginning on July 20th. We're going to be starting from Volume 2, Chapter 1, which is the very beginning of the Pali Canon and English study group, and we're going to be spending a year and a half to go through the entire book series. That'll be the third time that I've actually gone through the entire book series and taught it from beginning to end. And of course, there's the group learning program, which is on Sunday and Wednesday, which teaches Volume 1 of the book series, which is where you develop a foundation in the path to enlightenment. This is a 7-month program that's going to help you to gradually build up your foundation and understanding the path to enlightenment. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly, and invite you to study along with us. We're going to be reading individual chapters from the book series, where I'll invite people in Zoom. If you guys would like to volunteer to read, you can volunteer to read any of these chapters. And as you decide you might be interested to read the chapter, all you need to do is electronically raise your hand. I'll be able to see that here, and then I'll be able to call on you so that you can read the individual chapters. Once somebody reads it, either a student or myself, I will then teach a bit on that particular chapter, then open up to any and all questions that you guys have. So if you've studied these chapters ahead of time, this is a great opportunity for you to gain insight and wisdom further and beyond what it is that you currently understand based on you reading the chapter. But if you haven't read, it's okay, because you'll be studying here. But the book actually has a lot more detail in it than just what we're going to be covering in the class. So if there's someone who would like to volunteer to read, just let me know. Otherwise, I will go ahead and read the chapter. Looks like Yihang would like to read. Go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you, Teacher David. Persons who are worthy of gifts. 15th Discourse. Monks. Possessing 7 qualities, a monk is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of respectful salutation, an unsurpassed field of merit for the world. What 7? Here, a monk is one who knows the teachings, who knows the meaning, who knows himself, who knows moderation, who knows the proper time, who knows the community, and who knows the wholesome and unwholesome kinds of persons. 1. And how is a monk? One who knows the teachings. Here, a monk knows the teachings, the discourse, mixed prose and verse, expositions, verses, inspired utterances, quotations, birth stories, marvelous accounts, and questions and answers. If a monk did not know the teachings, the discourses, mixed prose and verse, expositions, verses, inspired utterances, quotations, birth stories, marvelous accounts, and questions and answers, he would not be called one who knows the teachings. But because he knows the teachings, the discourses, mixed prose and verse, expositions, verses, inspired utterances, quotations, birth stories, marvelous accounts, and questions and answers, he is called one who knows the teachings. Thus he is the one who knows the teachings. 2. And how is a monk one who knows the meaning? Here, a monk knows the meaning of this and that statement thus. This is the meaning of this statement. This is the meaning of that statement. If a monk did not know the meaning of this and that statement thus, he would not be called one who knows the meaning. But because he knows the meaning of this and that statement thus, this is the meaning of this statement, this is the meaning of that statement, he is called one who knows the meaning. Thus, he is one who knows the teachings and one who knows the meaning. 3. And how is a monk one who knows himself? Here, a monk knows himself thus: I have so much confidence, virtuous behavior, moral conduct, learning, generosity, wisdom, and discernment. If a monk did not know himself thus: I have so much confidence, virtuous behavior, moral conduct, learning, generosity, wisdom, and discernment, he would not be called one who knows himself. But because he knows himself thus: I have so much confidence, virtuous behavior, learning, generosity, wisdom, and discernment, he is called one who knows himself. Thus, he is one who knows the teachings, one who knows the meaning, and one who knows himself. 4. And how is a monk one who knows moderation? Here, a monk knows moderation in accepting robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicines and provisions for the sick. If a monk did not know moderation in accepting robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicines and provisions for the sick, he would not be called one who knows moderation. But because he knows moderation in accepting robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicines and provisions for the sick, he is called one who knows moderation. Thus, he is one who knows the teachings, one who knows the meaning, one who knows himself, and one who knows moderation. 5. And how is a monk one who knows the proper time? Here, a monk knows the proper time thus: this is the time for learning, this is the time for questioning, this is the time for effort, this is the time for seclusion. If a monk did not know the proper time, this is the time for learning, this is the time for questioning, this is the time for effort, this is the time for seclusion, he would not be called one who knows the proper time. But because he knows the proper time, this is the time for learning, this is the time for questioning, this is the time for effort, this is the time for seclusion, he is called one who knows the proper time. Thus, he is one who knows the teachings, one who knows the meaning, one who knows himself, one who knows moderation, and one who knows the proper time. 6. And how is a monk one who knows the community? A monk knows the assembly. This is a community of Khatyas. This is a community of Brahmins. This is a community of householders. This is a community of ascetics. Among these, one should approach this community in such a way. One should stop in such a way. One should act in such a way. One should sit down in such a way. One should speak in such a way. One should remain silent in such a way. If a monk did not know the community, this is a community of Khatyas. This is a community of Brahmins. This is a community of householders. This is a community of ascetics. Among these, one should approach this community in such a way. One should stop in such a way. One should act in such a way. One should sit down in such a way. One should speak in such a way. One should remain silent in such a way. He would not be called one who knows the community. But because he knows the community, this is a community of Khatyas. This is a community of Brahmins. This is a community of householders. This is a community of ascetics. Among these, one should approach this community in such a way. One should stop in such a way. One should act in such a way. One should sit down in such a way. One should speak in such a way. One should remain silent in such a way. He is called one who knows the community. Thus, he is one who knows the teachings, one who knows the meaning, one who knows himself, one who knows moderation, one who knows the proper time, and one who knows the community. 7. And how is a monk one who knows the wholesome and unwholesome kinds of persons? Here, a monk understands persons in terms of pairs. Two persons, one is interested to see the noble ones, one is not interested to see the noble ones. The person who is not interested to see the noble ones is in that respect blameworthy, responsible for wrongdoing. The person who is interested to see the noble ones is in that respect praiseworthy, deserving admiration, commendable. Two persons who want to see the noble ones, one is interested to hear the good wholesome teachings, one is not interested to hear the good wholesome teachings. The person who is not interested to hear the good wholesome teachings is in that respect blameworthy, responsible for wrongdoing. The person who is interested to hear the good wholesome teachings is in that respect praiseworthy, deserving admiration, commendable. Two persons who are interested to hear the good wholesome teachings, one listens to the teachings with eager ears, one does not listen to the teachings with eager ears. The person who does not listen to the teachings with eager ears is in that respect blameworthy, responsible for wrongdoing. The person who listens to the teachings with eager ears is in that respect praiseworthy, deserving admiration, commendable. Two persons who listen to the teachings with eager ears, one having heard the teachings retains them in mind, one having heard the teachings does not retain them in mind. The person who, having heard the teachings, does not retain them in mind is in that respect blameworthy, responsible for wrongdoing. The person who, having heard the teachings, retains them in mind is in that respect praiseworthy, deserving admiration, commendable. Two persons who, having heard the teachings, retain them in mind, one examines the meaning of the teachings that have been retained in mind, one does not examine the meaning of the teachings that have been retained in mind. The person who does not examine the meaning of the teachings that have been retained in mind is in that respect blameworthy, responsible for wrongdoing. The person who examines the meaning of the teachings that have been retained in mind is in that respect praiseworthy, deserving admiration, commendable. Two persons who examine the meaning of the teachings that have been retained in mind, one has understood the meaning and the teachings and then practices in accordance with the teachings. One has not understood the meaning and the teachings and does not practice in accordance with the teachings. The person who has not understood the meaning and the teachings and does not practice in accordance with the teaching is in that respect blameworthy, responsible for wrongdoing. The person who understood the meaning and the teachings and then practices in accordance with the teaching is in that respect praiseworthy, deserving admiration, commendable. Two persons who have understood the meaning and the teachings and then practice in accordance with the teachings, one is practicing for his own welfare but not for the welfare of others. One is practicing for his own welfare and for the welfare of others. The person who is practicing for his own welfare but not for the welfare of others is in that respect blameworthy, responsible for wrongdoing. The person who is practicing for his own welfare and for the welfare of others is in that respect praiseworthy, deserving admiration, commendable. It is in this way that a monk understands persons in terms of pairs. It is in this way that a monk is one who knows the wholesome and unwholesome kinds of persons. Possessing these 7 qualities, a monk is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of respectful salutation, an unsurpassed field of merit for the world.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. This was a kind of a longer one compared to what we normally see, so great job of reading that. And as much effort as it takes to read that, just think about the Buddha teaching this from his own mind, 2,500 years ago, speaking it word for word as clearly as it's written out here. So it just helps you to see the level of wisdom that he had in his own mind. So here, this is the 15th discourse where we've been learning a series of discourses where the Buddha is explaining the types of individuals for you to look for when you're actually practicing generosity in order to produce merit. Remember, generosity is the giving and sharing of more than is strictly required in any given situation, such as your time, effort, energy, and resources, without any expectation of anything in return. And you're going to need to practice generosity to train the mind to let go. That's going to help you to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, which ultimately helps you eliminate discontentedness and experience enlightenment. And then not only are you practicing generosity with all the people around you, but you're also practicing generosity towards the continuation of the teachings of the Buddha in order to produce merit, where you're making the teachings available for other people. So when you're making the teachings available for other people, you're making offerings to ordained practitioners, to teachers, to temples, things like this. And the Buddha is giving you guidance in these different discourses of the type of individual that you would like to look for. Because if you can imagine during the lifetime of a Buddha, there would be countless people around him. And the people that were closest to him and learning closely, they would be practicing the teachings very closely and be getting to enlightenment. But there's people on the outer fringes that aren't necessarily practicing the teachings very closely. So he's giving guidance of who to support, because if you're supporting people who are practicing the teachings very closely, this will produce a higher quality of merit and allow the teachings to come into the world in a more profound way. So he's given us lots of guidance on that so far, and now he's giving us a lot of detailed guidance, and he's giving us these 7 things to look for. The first one is someone who knows the teachings and the discourses so that they understand the original words of the Buddha. That's the first thing, because you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment as an individual if the person that you were learning from didn't know the original teachings of the Buddha. Not only did they know the original teachings, but they understand the meaning. That's this next part, that they can talk about the meaning and they can expound upon the meaning of what it is that the Buddha is actually describing in his teachings. Then one who knows himself, that a teacher, if they're enlightened, they're going to know they're enlightened, but if they're not yet enlightened, they would know where they are in their practice in terms of their level of confidence, their moral conduct, how much learning they need to do, their generosity, their wisdom, and their discernment or their wise decision making. An individual who's sharing the teachings to get to enlightenment, they should be a deep practitioner themselves, either enlightened or very close to it. So if they're not enlightened themselves, they're going to need to know themselves and where they're at on the path. And even if they're enlightened, they would know that they are enlightened, because that's going to then help them to be able to teach others. Then the Buddha talks about one who knows moderation, because anybody who's sharing the teachings in the way that the Buddha taught would share the teachings based in generosity, that they're not putting a price on their courses or things like that. They're just openly sharing through their own generosity, but they will be accepting donations in order to support the continued sharing of the teachings and also to support their basic existence, to be able to have food, clothing, shelter, and medical care and things like this. So if an individual knows moderation, what the Buddha is explaining is that they know how to accept gifts in a way that doesn't leave their students lacking the things that they need. Because part of the teachings is to teach their students to not practice generosity based in craving, desire, attachment, but to also not be selfish. So if a student is unenlightened, in which they would be, and they're learning this middle way, it's very likely that you'll have students that are practicing generosity that aren't practicing generosity from the middle way. So a teacher is going to need to be observant of their students and be sure that they're practicing generosity in the middle way. So if somebody notices that a student is financially having difficulties, but yet they're making these enormous offerings to them, a wise teacher would have discussion with the student to be able to ensure that the student understands how to practice generosity from the middle, that the teacher isn't just taking. And I can give you an example of this, that a few years ago, there was a student whose wife got laid off from work. And they had been studying with me for a good 8 months or a year, and they had never offered any kind of generosity to me, but I just kept helping them and kept teaching them. And then not too long after their wife had gotten laid off of work, they mentioned to me that they were planning to make an offering to me. And I consulted with them and I said, are you sure this is a good time? Because your wife just got laid off of work and maybe you're going to have challenges with your bills. Maybe you should think about this a little bit before you make any decision of whether or not to make an offering. So this is something that a teacher would do if they understand their students and they are observant to no moderation. They wouldn't just accept countless gifts from a particular student, because that student may not be practicing generosity from the middle way and they may be depleting their resources. So a teacher needs to have the discipline and moderation to be able to observe that and then share teachings with the student that's going to help them. Then the Buddha talks about a teacher or a monk who knows the proper time for learning, for questioning, for effort, in seclusion, going off by themselves, right? I can give you an example of this, that this week I've been teaching a lot. There's a lot of new students coming. There's a lot of local students that are coming, and they've been interested in spending time outside of class. So I've been having a few events here at my house where students have been coming over and we've been spending time together and doing different activities. Well, last night or yesterday in class, some students were asking like, hey, can we come over to your house and watch some football games? There's a big football match going on in Europe where students were interested to come watch it on our TV. And I said, what time does that start? And they said, 11 p.m. So I knew it wasn't going to be over until at least 12:30 p.m. And I've been doing a lot of teaching and going out and spending a lot of time with the students. And I let them know that maybe tonight wouldn't be the best night to do something like that. I needed time for myself, right? So you need to know time for seclusion, time to be alone, time to rest and relax. The teacher needs to balance these things, the time for learning, the time for questioning, the time for effort, but also the time to relax and be in seclusion and be with yourself as well. Then the Buddha talks about a teacher who you might consider to make offerings to would know communities. In other words, a community of Khattiyas, which these are people that were practicing the teachings pretty closely. Then a community of Brahmins, which are Hindu priests, a community of householders, who are household practitioners practicing the teachings of the Buddha, and a community of ascetics, individuals who are practicing the teachings as an ordained practitioner. So an individual would know these individual communities and who's in those communities and so forth. Then the Buddha talks about this one where he says an individual would know the teachings as well, where he talks about, okay, an individual would know these wholesome types of individuals and unwholesome types of individuals as well. That an individual would be interested to see the noble ones. So a teacher who's not yet enlightened or someone who is even enlightened would be interested in spending time around individuals who are in one of the 4 stages of enlightenment. Doesn't mean they don't spend time with other people. It's just that they would be interested in spending time with wise individuals and helping to further cultivate wisdom. That they would also be interested in hearing the good, wholesome teachings. That's this next one that he's talking about. And then once having heard the teachings, they would listen to them with eager ears, meaning they're not just looking at their phone or listening to a YouTube video while the teacher's talking, or reading a book, or just kind of lackadaisical, not really caring about what's being talked about, but they have eager ears to listen to what's being taught with the teachings. And then he talks about one who, having heard the teachings with those eager ears, would retain the teachings in mind. They would retain them in their mind to be able to understand what they are. And then having retained the teachings, they would examine them. This is the investigation that the Buddha teaches, that you investigate the teachings, you reflect on them to independently verify them, and you practice them. So here, the next one, he's talking about not only examining the teachings and retaining them, but that you also practice in accordance with the teachings. So you would see that in any teacher that you would be interested to support, is that they would not just understand the teachings intellectually, but they would be practicing the teachings. You were not interested in judging a teacher, but you're interested in looking at their practice. Are they bitter? Are they harsh? Are they hostile? Are they gambling? Are they smoking? Are they hitting animals? Are they, doing other things? Are they using drugs and intoxicants? You can see ordained practitioners and teachers who do that. Are they spending the donations that they are getting on things like, Gucci sunglasses, Fendi bags, private airplanes, things like this? These are all things that you would like to pay attention to, because your resources that you're sharing with a teacher should be used for their basic survival, their basic needs, but then you should see certain things coming back to the community in terms of courses, classes, and retreats, in terms of a nice facility to be able to host classes and things like this. That if they're just putting it in their pocket, then they're not necessarily teaching for the right reasons, and you would like to pay attention to that. Not that you have an expectation of how a teacher should use the donations, but you should notice that they're using a small portion of those things to sustain their life, but then there's certain things coming back to the community to help the community to continue to learn. Then the Buddha teaches that having understood the teachings and practice in accordance with the teachings, but they would then be practicing for their own welfare and for the welfare of others. Whereas if they were only practicing for their own welfare, they haven't understood the teachings of the Buddha, that when you're practicing these teachings, you're training your mind to not cause harm to others. And by not causing harm to others, you won't see harm coming back to you. You'll be able to clean up your life practice. So when you're learning and practicing these teachings, yes, it's good for your welfare and your peacefulness, but it's also good for other people too, and other beings. Because if you eliminate killing and stealing and sexual misconduct and lying and taking substances that cause heedlessness, for example, if you improve your moral conduct, you're not causing so much harm to other beings. You've significantly reduced the harm you're causing other beings. So you learning and practicing these teachings isn't only for your welfare, it's for the welfare of others around you. Because if you have ego, or if you have harsh speech or aggressive speech, you're putting that out and other people have to deal with that. And you would like to be practicing these teachings for your peacefulness and welfare, but also for others as well, because you're causing less and less harm to others. So these are the qualities that the Buddha is suggesting that you look for in an individual who you're planning to make offerings to. And of course, we learned all those other ways too that he discussed in the prior discourses. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. Oh, there we go. Yihang, you have a question, or is that to read?
Also have a question about the last part. I think that was the 7. I know this is for maybe you to see who is the one you give practice generosity to, so that is a merit. But I was also thinking, would that be like in the very last one, that practicing these wholesome teachings not only for the own welfare but also for others? Would that also be a motivation for someone who practicing the teaching? For example, if I could thinking of adapting this motivation for myself to practicing these teachings.
Yeah, that's one of the beauties of the teachings of the Buddha, that here he's describing the type of individual that you would like to look for in order to practice generosity to produce merit. But you can glean all these golden nuggets out of here about how he's describing the practice of an individual that is practicing really closely, and you can practice those same things too. So while he's describing it in terms of how to identify someone to practice generosity with, you can actually practice these same things, because what he's describing is a teacher who is sharing these teachings should either be enlightened or very close to it. So he's describing the process of how to become an enlightened being and how to practice as an enlightened being. So you can glean all that insight out of this discourse for your own practice as well.
Okay, because I was thinking of this case of myself now. I feel like in the past few months, I am practicing out of a huge motivation that seeing the life is getting better just for my life myself. And then I feel like once it's not, or it's just stay still, then the motivation decreases. So I was thinking, would you have any advice to kind of transfer this motivation to the welfare of the whole beings, all beings? Because I feel like it's still kind of huge for like an individual to practice.
Yeah, sometimes when it comes to doing something for ourselves, sometimes people are really selfish and they're more than willing to do something for themselves. But sometimes other people, they are not so motivated to do things for themselves. They're more motivated to do things for other people. So if it's like, whether it's like go to the restaurant by yourself and have a really nice dinner by yourself versus go to the restaurant and take your mom to the restaurant, you're maybe more motivated to do something like that, right? So if that motivates you, like where you're motivated by doing things for other people, this is one of the ways that you can get motivated, is that you're doing this for other people. It's not just for yourself. And this is something that a Buddha thinks about too as they're journeying to enlightenment. It's very challenging to get to enlightenment. It's not easy, but it's not difficult either. But it's a challenge. And as getting to enlightenment as a Buddha really thinks about other people in the entire world, that by them getting to enlightenment, they're going to be able to help so many people in the world. So an individual who's going to become a Buddha thinks about these kinds of things too. And that's why he's sharing this with you, is that this is what helped to motivate him to get to enlightenment, is thinking about other people and the fact that getting to enlightenment, you're not causing harm to others, but also he was able to cultivate the wisdom to help others too. So this can be motivating for you as well.
I understood that example. Thank you. But I was also just thinking, maybe just me recently, I got very sometimes also easily to get attached to another people to seeing the result. But I think from the teaching, I also, while practicing this generosity, but also needs to disattach with the result of other person receiving this. Like if they're happy or not, I don't really have to get attached with that. I just practice from my side.
Yeah, it's understanding that you're doing this for your own welfare, in the welfare of other people, without having expectation that anybody will recognize that you are doing these things and becoming a better person. Because if you have that attachment or that craving or desire for other people to recognize what it is that you're doing, then your mind's going to experience discontentedness, because there's a craving, desire, attachment. So it's mentally understanding that I am doing this for myself and the welfare of other people as well, without an expectation or a desire for other people to acknowledge that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let me check our internet one more time and see. I don't see any questions anywhere. So let's go to the next one. And Yihang, if you would like to read this, or if you need a break, just let me know.
I could read this.
Okay.
Okay. A monk who is perfected in morality, a monk refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood. Venerable Sir, whereas some ascetics and Brahmins feeding on the food of the dedicated make their living by such base arts, such wrong means of livelihood as palmistry, divining by signs, portents, dreams, body marks, mouth gnawings, fire ablations from a ladle of husks, rice powder, rice grains, ghee or oil, from the mouth or of blood, breeding the fingertips, house and garden lore, skill in charms, ghost lore, earth house lore, snake lore, poison lore, rat lore, bird lore, crow lore, foretelling a person's lifespan, charms against arrows, knowledge of animals' cries. A monk refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood. Thus, he is perfected in morality, whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as judging the marks of gems, sticks, clothes, swords, spears, arrows, weapons, women, men, boys, girls, male and female slaves, elephants, horses, buffaloes, bulls, cows, goats, rams, cocks, quail, iguanas, bamboo rats, tortoise, deer. A monk refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood. Thus he is perfected in morality, whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts, such predicting the sheaves will march out, the sheaves will march back, Our ships will advance and other ships will retreat. Our ships will win and other ships will lose. The other ships will win and ours will lose. Thus, there will be victory for one side and defeat for the other. A monk refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood. Thus, he is perfected in morality. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as predicting an eclipse of the moon, the sun, a star, that the sun and moon will go on their proper course, will go astray, that a star will go on its proper course, will go astray, that there will be a shower of meteors and a blaze in the sky, an earthquake, thunder, a rising, setting, darkening, brightening of the moon, the sun, the stars, and such will be the outcome of these things. A monk refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood, thus he is perfected in morality. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as predicting good or bad rainfall, a good or bad harvest, security, danger, disease, health, or accounting, computing, calculating, poetic composition, philosophizing. A monk refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood. Thus he is perfected in morality. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins make their living by such base arts as arranging the giving and taking in marriage, engagements and divorces, declaring the time for saving and spending, bringing good or bad luck, procuring abortions, using spells to bind the tongue, binding the jaw, making the hands jerk, causing deafness, getting answers with a mirror, a girl medium, a heavenly being, worshipping the sun or great Brahma god, breathing fire, invoking the goddess of luck. A monk refrains from such base arts and the wrong means of livelihood, thus he is perfected in morality. Whereas some ascetics and Brahmins, feeding on the food of the dedicated, make their living by such base arts, such wrong means of livelihood as appeasing the heavenly beings and redeeming vows to them, making earth house spells, causing virility or impotence, preparing and consecrating building sites, giving ritual rinsings and bathings, making sacrifices, giving emetics, purges, expectorants, and phlegmagogues, giving ear, eye, nose medicine, ointments, and counter ointments, eye surgery, pediatry, using bonds to counter the side effects of previous remedies. A monk refrains from such base arts and wrong means of livelihood, thus he is perfected in morality. And then, sir, that monk who is perfected in morality sees no danger from any side owing to his being restrained by morality, just as a duly anointed Khattiya king, having conquered his enemies, by that very fact sees no danger from any side. So the monk, on account of his morality, sees no danger anywhere. He experiences in himself the blameless bliss that comes from maintaining this noble morality. In this way, sir, he is perfected in morality.
Thank you, Yihang. So, to understand this discourse and why the Buddha is sharing it, it's important to understand what he set up and what he was practicing during his life. When he left from the royal family, he left the royal riches of the royal family, being a prince destined to become a king. And now he went out in this life of homelessness where he walked down the street and accepted donations for food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. That oftentimes students would not only give him food and things like this, but he would be living right alongside of them. They would invite him into their home, and he would teach the family and he would teach the other villagers the teachings of what it takes to get to this enlightened mental state where the mind's peaceful and joyful. So he left behind the royal riches and entered into this life of homelessness. And now he's fully dependent on the generosity of his students. And his students are dependent on his generosity of sharing the teachings. Well, if an individual was off on the side while they were collecting these free resources from the community of food, clothing, shelter, medical care, and they're now running a business or they're doing any of these kinds of things that the Buddha taught here, then they're not really dedicating their time, effort, and energy and resources towards developing their own practice to get to enlightenment through cultivating wisdom. So therefore, they're not going to have the wisdom to give back to the community. So essentially, someone might even say that this person's a freeloader, right? That they're accepting all these donations from the community, but yet they're not doing the work themselves to train their own mind and then give back the wisdom that it takes to get to enlightenment to the community who's actually supporting them. Instead, they're just getting free food, clothing, shelter, and medical care, but yet they're doing all these other things on the side to be able to make money. And a lot of these things that the Buddha is talking about is actually just the opposite of the teachings of the Buddha. They're promoting wrong view. If you understand what right view is with the Four Noble Truths and how the mind functions and the natural law of Gama and all these other things through the teachings of the Buddha, you can establish right view. Well, if you're a ordained practitioner helping people get to enlightenment and you're doing things like palmistry, divining by signs, doing these different things that he's talking about here, you're blessing and consecrating property and you're participating in marriages and divorces and abortions, you're actually taking the community in the opposite direction of enlightenment. You're promoting wrong view. But as an ordained practitioner, it would be wise to cultivate your own mind to get to enlightenment so you have wisdom to give back to the community, rather than do something that's going to promote wrong view, which is taking the community in the exact opposite direction of what is needed. So that's why the Buddha is teaching these things, because an individual who's living on donations from their students should be dedicated to getting to enlightenment themselves and then sharing those teachings and that wisdom with the community. This is the mutual support that the Buddha created. Now, some of these things are things that ordained practitioners wouldn't do, but there's no harm in a household practitioner doing these kinds of things. So even a household practitioner doing some kind of livelihood that is promoting wrong view would be unwise. So here the Buddha is talking about accounting, computing, calculating, poetic composition, and things like this. A household practitioner may very well do these things, and this would be a right livelihood for them, perhaps. But for an ordained practitioner who's living off of the donations of the students, to go off and do these kinds of things is taking them away from the core central path, which is to cultivate their mind, develop wisdom, and then share that wisdom with others. So that's why the Buddha is teaching this, is so that if you're interested in making offerings to produce merit, that you would look for people who aren't doing these things. If they're a teacher, if they're an ordained practitioner doing palm reading, blessing and consecrating houses and property and businesses, if they're doing tattoos and things like this as an ordained practitioner or teacher, you're not interested in supporting that because you're actually giving that person support, but yet they're not doing the work themselves to meditate and train their mind and cultivate wisdom. So that's why the Buddha is sharing these kinds of things. So let me know what questions you guys have on this particular teaching. Looks like Yihang has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. I wasn't very sure about the philosophizing there. Could you please give an example, perhaps?
Philosophizing is like there's people who are philosophers, right? That they just expound about the philosophical things about the world. So if an ordained practitioner was doing that, they're just sometimes even speculating about the world. This isn't what the Buddha taught. The Buddha taught that ordained practitioners should teach the natural laws of existence, which is the actual truth, where philosophy oftentimes isn't necessarily the truth. So if an ordained practitioner was doing those things, it would be a wrong livelihood and they wouldn't be perfected in morality. But if a household practitioner was choosing to do that, that's completely different. That's something that maybe someone's a philosophy major and they go to school and they get a degree in that. And then maybe they're either teaching that or doing that as a career or occupation. So it's very different between how ordained practitioners are teachers who are living off of the dedicated support of household practitioners versus a household practitioner just practicing a livelihood of which they're getting paid to do that because people are interested in them doing that particular service or that particular product.
Okay, very clear. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. It looks like Hella has a question here in Facebook. Thank you so much for the class and for all the teachings. I would like to ask a question that isn't related to today's subject, please. When a fully enlightened being, Arahant, drops the body, what happens next? I understand that the cycle of rebirth is over for them, but can they occasionally incarnate if they choose to? Do they become what in New Age is called an ascended master? No, they do not. If an individual is enlightened and they get to death, they're not going to be reborn in the cycle of rebirth, which is what you're describing, but there is no further existence in the cycle of rebirth at that point. What happens next for an enlightened being is an undeclared teaching. So the Buddha doesn't declare once you get to enlightenment what is next. And I have various reasons why I think this is the case, that he leaves it as an undeclared teaching. He actually calls it out specifically as an undeclared teaching. He shares at a certain time where he says, remember what I taught. I taught this. And then he says, remember what I did not teach. I did not teach this. And he gives 10 things that he didn't teach. And one of the things that he didn't teach is what happens next for an enlightened being. But by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind is so peaceful and so joyful in the present moment, you're not going to be worried and you're not going to even care what's next. Because if there is something next, it's either as good as what you're experiencing or better. And if there isn't something next, so be it. Who cares? Your mind's already peaceful. You're already joyful in the present moment. So there's various reasons why I think the Buddha didn't teach this because of his teaching and the way that he taught, but we can talk about those if you'd like. You can also see them in the book series that I share, but there isn't any declared teaching of what happens next for an enlightened being, but we know with 100% certainty that they aren't going to be in existence in the cycle of rebirth. So that is what I would share with you on that particular question. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. Yusuf, I see you said something there, but if you have a clarifying question, you're welcome to clarify that. All right, Yihang, are you interested in reading this? Okay, there you go. Go ahead, ma'am.
Gifts of teachings is more superior than gifts of material things. Monks, there are these two kinds of gifts, a gift of material things and a gift of the teachings. Of these two kinds of gifts, this is supreme, a gift of the teachings. There are these two kinds of sharing of material things and sharing of the teachings. Of these two kinds of sharing, this is supreme, sharing of the teachings. There are these two kinds of assistance with the material things and assistance with the teachings. Of these two kinds of assistance, this is supreme, assistance with the teachings.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So here the Buddha is essentially saying that the best thing you could ever give to anybody is the actual teachings, because that's what's going to lead to the complete elimination of anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All those discontent feelings and others are completely eliminated from the mind. You can't press a button and give somebody enlightenment, but you can support the teachings through your generous gifts to support temples, ordained practitioners, and teachers to be able to share the teachings. And that's the same as giving the gift of the teachings. So here the Buddha is explaining this to you so that If you decide that these teachings have been impactful for you and you're noticing the improvement to the condition of your mind in your life, and you would like to ensure that these teachings are available for future generations, the way to do that is to support the teachings. And that has been going on for 2,500 years now, that the teachings have been supported one generation after another after another. They're still around because they work. So this is how you give the gift of the teachings. Because you could give your parents and your siblings and your friends and family members all the material things in the world, new cars, new houses, new anything, vacations, trips, and things like this. But that pales in comparison to giving them the gift of being able to learn and practice these teachings so that they can actually eliminate discontentedness and escape the cycle of rebirth. So that's why the Buddha is saying this is the supreme gift, the supreme sharing, the supreme assistance. And this is one of the reasons why I do what I do and share these teachings, because I know this is the best thing I could ever do with my life, is to share these teachings with others, to be able to help guide others to this enlightened mental state. It's the best gift you could ever give to anybody. But of course, each individual needs to do the work themselves. They need to be an independent practitioner where they're learning and growing and developing on the path, but they're going to need teachers, they're going to need resources, they're going to need centers in order to learn and grow and develop. So that's what our generosity does, is it supports the continued sharing of the teachings by having centers, by having meditation cushions and projectors and sound equipment, lighting, computers, places to share the teachings, books and resources and all these things that are needed. And as you're practicing the generosity, it's actually helping your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment so that you can get closer and closer to enlightenment, as well as helping other people get access to the teachings. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so we'll move to the next one. All right, go ahead, Yihang.
Among gifts, the best is the gift of the teachings. Monks, there are these 4 powers. What 4? The power of wisdom, the power of energy, the power of blamelessness, and the power of sustaining a favorable relationship. 1. And what, monks, is the power of wisdom? One has clearly seen and explored with wisdom those qualities that are unwholesome and considered as unwholesome, those that are wholesome and considered as wholesome, those that are blamable and considered as blamable, those that are blameless and considered as blameless, those that are dark and considered as dark, those that are bright and considered as bright, those that should not be cultivated and are considered as not to be cultivated, those that should be cultivated and are considered as to be cultivated, those that are unworthy of the noble ones and considered as unworthy of the noble ones, those that are worthy of the noble ones and considered as worthy of the noble ones. This is called the power of wisdom. 2. And what is the power of energy? One generates aspiration to abandon those qualities that are unwholesome and considered as unwholesome, those that are blamable and considered as blamable, those that are dark and considered as dark, those that should not be cultivated and are considered as not to be cultivated, those that are unworthy of the noble ones and considered as unworthy of the noble ones. One makes an effort, arouses energy, applies one's mind, and strives for this. One generates aspiration to obtain all those qualities that are wholesome and considered as wholesome, those that are blameless and considered as blameless, those that are bright and considered as bright, those that should be cultivated and are considered as to be cultivated, those that are worthy of the noble ones and considered as worthy of the noble ones. One makes an effort, arouses energy, applies one's mind, and strives for this. This is called the power of energy. 3. And what is the power of blamelessness? Here, a noble disciple engages in blameless bodily, verbal, and mental conduct. This is called the power of blamelessness. 4. And what is the power of sustaining and favorable relationship? There are these 4 means of sustaining a favorable relationship: giving, endearing speech, beneficent conduct, and equality. Among gifts, the best is the gift of the teachings. Among types of endearing speech, the best is repeatedly teaching the teachings to one who is interested in it and listens with eager ears. Among types of beneficent conduct, the best is when one encourages, settles, and establishes a person without confidence in the accomplishment of confidence, an unwholesome person in the accomplishment of virtuous behavior, a selfish person in the accomplishment of generosity, and an unwise person in the accomplishment of wisdom. Among types of equality, the best is that a stream enterer is equal to a stream enterer. A once returner is equal to a once returner. A non-returner is equal to a non-returner. And an arahant is equal to an arahant. This is called the power of sustaining a favorable relationship. These monks are the 4 powers. When a noble disciple possesses these 4 powers, he has transcended 5 fears. What 5? 1. Fear of loss of livelihood. 2. Fear of shame. 3. Fear of shyness in communities. 4. Fear of death. And 5. Fear of a bad destination in a future rebirth. The noble disciple reflects thus: I am not afraid on account of my livelihood. Why should I be afraid on account of my livelihood? I have the 4 powers: the power of wisdom, the power of energy, the power of blamelessness, and the power of sustaining a favorable relationship. An unwise person might be afraid on account of his livelihood. A lazy person might be afraid on account of his livelihood. A person who engages with blamable bodily, verbal, and mental conduct might be afraid on account of his livelihood. A person who does not sustain favorable relationships might be afraid on account of his livelihood. I am not afraid of shame. I am not afraid of shyness in communities. I am not afraid of death. I am not afraid of a bad destination in a future rebirth. Why should I be afraid of a bad destination in a future rebirth? I have the 4 powers: the power of wisdom, the power of energy, the power of blamelessness, and the power of sustaining a favorable relationship. An unwise person might be afraid of a bad destination. A lazy person might be afraid of a bad destination. A person who engages with blamable bodily, verbal, and mental conduct might be afraid of a bad destination. A person who does not sustain favorable relationships might be afraid of a bad destination in a future rebirth. When a noble disciple possesses these 4 powers, he has transcended these 5 fears.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So here the Buddha is giving these 4 powers that you can cultivate and looking at them in that way. The power of wisdom, of energy, blamelessness, and being able to sustain favorable relationships. Of course, the power of wisdom is first, because without wisdom, you wouldn't be able to do all the other things. The wisdom comes through learning, reflecting, and practicing the teachings. Then the energy is to arise the energy and effort to actually apply the teachings. Then the blamelessness is knowing what's wholesome and unwholesome, and sustaining the favorable relationships, or being able to have harmonious relationships in your life. If you're able to accomplish these 4 things through the Eightfold Path and all the other teachings of the Buddha, you can get to a point where you have no fear. because you don't have fear of certain things occurring in your life because you have these four powers. These fears that the Buddha is talking about here is fear of losing your livelihood. Well, if you have wisdom, if you have energy to cultivate the mind, if you understand what's wholesome and unwholesome, and you have sustainable relationships, you're not afraid of losing your livelihood because you know you're doing a great job and your boss adores what it is that you're doing and wouldn't be interested in letting you go. Or if you have your own business, you know that you're conducting it very well and there's no way that this business is going to fall apart. Same thing with fear of shame, that if you're cultivating the wisdom and you're making wise decisions, there's not going to be any shame or shyness or fear of death or fear of a bad destination. So these are the four things that you can cultivate as part of your journey to enlightenment. So let me know if you guys have any questions here. All right, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So now we go to chapter 75. Okay, Yihang.
The noble. I actually also wanted to mention, I feel like I saw Yusuf ask what is fear of shyness, but should I continue?
You would like to ask me what the fear of shyness is?
No, I think Yusuf was asking, but
Oh,
should I
okay.
continue?
What is the fear of shyness? Oh, sorry, I didn't see that, Yusuf. The fear of shyness is that if you've ever been shy or you've ever been around someone that's shy, there's usually a bit of fear in there. And this is coming from the personal existence view, that first fetter, where the mind is wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. So therefore, the mind is shy and not wanting to maybe have public speaking or talk in public or do any other kind of thing like that. That there's this shyness because you know in your mind with a lack of wisdom that you're doing things that are unwise, right? And there's that pollution of personal existence view in there. Looks like he's raising his hand now. Go ahead, Yusuf. You have a question?
Yeah, should I continue about this thing or leave it sometimes else? What do you say?
If you have a question,
About this shyness community.
if you have a question,
Yeah,
go
okay.
ahead and ask it.
Well, I have a lot, not shyness, but like suppression about my personality. I feel like my personality is suppressed that I can't let it go with others, that I feel it could be silly or stupid or things like this that I don't know if it will be good in front of others, it will be moral or something like this. I don't know how to put the question because it happened so quickly. So do you understand it?
Yes. What you should do in this situation is when you're noticing that arising is cut it off and let it go. Ultimately, you would like to proactively eliminate personal existence view through what I share in Volume 1, Chapter 16. But right now, I encourage you to really just focus on the Eightfold Path so that you know without a doubt that whenever any discontentedness comes up, your automatic response should be to cut it off and let it go and redirect the mind. That's going to shave back the pollutions in the mind more and more and more.
Yeah, thank you for this advice. But what if my personality was like silly or stupid or causing harm to others and I can't see that in it?
That's where cultivating the wisdom of the path, that's going to teach you if you are causing harm to others. So that's why the Buddha is sharing here that the power of wisdom is first, the power of the energy, that means you're applying the effort to cultivate the wisdom and implement the teachings, the power of blamelessness, where you understand what's wholesome and unwholesome, and then there's the power of sustaining favorable relationships, which you will be able to do if you have wisdom, the power of energy, and the power of blamelessness.
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we'll move to chapter 75, the noble giving. Go ahead, Yihang.
You did with me, not Ian.
Thank you. The noble giving. First discourse. The noble disciple, householder, who possesses four things is a stream enterer, no longer bound to the world fixed in destiny, with enlightenment as his destination. What for? Here, householders. 1. A noble disciple possesses confirmed confidence in the Buddha. Thus, the perfectly enlightened one is an arahant, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true wisdom and conduct, fortunate knower of the worlds, unsurpassed leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of heavenly beings and humans, the enlightened one, the fortunate one. 2. He possesses confirmed confidence in the teachings, thus, the teachings are well expounded by the perfectly enlightened one, directly visible, immediate, inviting one to come and see, applicable, to be personally experienced by the wise. 3. He possesses confirmed confidence in the community, thus, the community of the perfectly enlightened one's disciples is practicing the wholesome way, practicing the straight way, practicing the true way, practicing the proper way. That is, the 4 pairs of persons, the 8 types of individuals. This community of the perfectly enlightened one's disciples is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of respectful salutation, the unsurpassed field of merit for the world. 4. He resides at home with a mind free of the stain of selfishness, freely generous, open-handed, joyful in letting go, one devoted to charity, joyful in giving and sharing. A noble disciple who possesses these 4 things is a stream enterer, no longer bound to the nether world, fixed in destiny, with enlightenment as his destination.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So this is just one discourse where the Buddha is talking about certain qualities that an individual will have having gotten to the first stage of enlightenment. These aren't the only 4 things that someone will possess in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, but they are 4 individual things. And having gotten to the first stage of enlightenment, you will get to enlightenment, either in this life or a future life. You're no longer bound to the nether world, meaning you will no longer be reborn into the lower realms of hell, animal, or afflicted spirits. If you die in the stage of stream entry of the first stage of enlightenment, you will be reborn back into the human world no more than 7 times before you ultimately will get to enlightenment. That's why the Buddha says that a stream enterer is fixed in destination. And some of the qualities this individual has, among others, is they have confirmed confidence in the Buddha, because they would have seen such significant progress to the condition of their mind in their life that they would have this confirmed confidence in the Buddha, and they would know that for sure that he was an actual Buddha, because they wouldn't have been able to get to that first stage of enlightenment and that significant improvement to the condition of the mind in their life without having learned these teachings that he shared. And they would also then have confirmed confidence in the teachings as well, because they would have seen that these teachings lead to that improved condition of mind in the improved condition of life. They would also have confirmed confidence in the community, because not only is a teacher helping you, but your community that you're part of is as well. Like Yihang being very polite and respectful and generous, reading. She also was respectful to Yusuf and alerting the teacher that he asked a question even though I didn't see it. And you can model this conduct from the other members of the community. You can see people around you that are practicing the teachings and you're like, wow, I really like how they did that. I would like to incorporate some of that. So maybe if you see something here in our classes or when you spend time with us in real life, you can observe certain people practicing the teachings very closely. And now you have confidence in this community that they're practicing the teachings closely, and they're here to support you and encourage you along the path. And then the whole reason why this one is in the book is one of the qualities of a stream enterer is that they will be freely generous. They will have been accomplished in generosity, where they will live open-handedly and be joyful in sharing and giving to others. And this is part of what has led to their development of the mind to get to the first stage of enlightenment. So you wouldn't even be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment without practicing a certain degree of generosity. So that's why this is in this book, because you're going to need to practice generosity. While this is the 13th book of the book series, and it's the last book of the book series, this is such an important practice that I can't emphasize it enough, how important it is to practice generosity every single day and frequently be practicing it every single day. And that doesn't mean that you're giving $500 every single day to somebody, but your time, your effort, your energy, and your resources, you would like to frequently be giving, because this is what's going to train your mind to let go, let go, let go. Okay, so this is some of the 4 qualities that an individual getting to the first stage of enlightenment will be practicing. Let me know what questions you guys have here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So now we'll move to the next chapter, which is chapter 76. All right, Ihang, if you'd like to read that one, go ahead, ma'am.
The Noble Giving, Second Discourse. In that case, Sariputta, he does not give a gift with expectations, with a bound mind, looking for rewards. He does not give a gift thinking, having passed away, I will make use of this. He does not give a gift thinking, giving is good. He does not give a gift thinking, giving was practiced before by my father and forefathers. I should not abandon this ancient family custom. He does not give a gift thinking, I cook, these people do not cook. It isn't right that I who cook should not give to those who do not cook, but rather he gives a gift thinking just as he sees of the elders, that is, Ataka, Vamaka, heavenly being, Vesamita, Yamatagi, Angirasa, Bharatavaya, Vaseta, Kasapa, and Bagu held those great sacrifices, so I will share a gift. He does not give a gift thinking, when I am giving a gift, my mind becomes tranquil, and energy and joy arise, but rather he gives a gift thinking it's an enhancement of the mind, an accessory of the mind. He gives that gift to an ascetic or a Brahmin, food and drink, clothing and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ornaments, bedding, dwellings, and lighting. Having given such a gift, with the breakup of the body, after death, he is reborn in companionship with the heavenly beings of Brahma's company. Having exhausted that Dhamma, psychic potency, glory, and authority, he does not come back and return to this state of being.
Okay, thank you, Ihang. So here, the Buddha is helping you to understand the purpose of practicing generosity. And he shares it down here. He says that the reason why you give a gift is because it's an enhancement of the mind. That's the whole reason why you're practicing generosity. You're not interested in having expectations when you're practicing generosity. Because if you practice generosity with an expectation, it's not actually generosity. There's still craving, desire, attachment in there. And if you're practicing the giving and sharing with an expectation, then you're setting yourself up for painful feelings because your expectations aren't going to be met. You should be giving and sharing without any expectation of anything in return, because oftentimes the mind becomes selfish, where it only does something because it wants something in return. So if you're giving somebody something because you want something back from them, you're not practicing pure generosity in the situation. So I give the example oftentimes that I think you can relate to, that if you were going into a store and you saw someone behind you and you hold the door for them and they walk through, if you're standing there with the expectation that they will say thank you and they don't say thank you, you will be frustrated and you will be agitated and you'll be annoyed. And if you understand the universal truth of impermanence, it's not possible for every single person who walks through the door to say thank you. Therefore, if you're standing there with the expectation of a thank you, your mind is going to experience discontentedness. And you're only doing this because you want something in return. So you need to get to the point where you're practicing generosity and you're not even expecting a thank you from the person who you're practicing generosity with. So if you can get to that point where you're readily giving and sharing without any expectation, not even an expectation of a thank you, this is helping to enhance your mind because you're training your mind to let go. You're training your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, eliminate selfishness. And that's what you would ultimately like to get to. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Looks like Yusuf has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Sir, about the last discourse, you said to be generous every day if possible. Sometimes there is lack of energy, tiredness, or complacency. Is it better to share my time in those situations or to not do that, to not overload the mind?
The whole reason why the complacency and the laziness is there is because of craving, desire, attachment. The mind's holding on. So if you refrain from practicing generosity because of the laziness, then it just allows the laziness to continue. So you need to do just the opposite of what the mind wants to do. In the unenlightened state, the mind is typically going to be interested in doing just the opposite of what would be wise to actually do. So in this situation, I would encourage you to practice generosity because that's going to help the mind to let go. And you can practice generosity as simple as, like I mentioned, you're walking into a store and you hold the door for the people behind you. That takes like 5 seconds, 10 seconds. And you can be doing these kinds of things throughout your day. You can donate blood. You can do all kinds of different things that don't even cost any money whatsoever. But you are sharing your time, your effort, your energy, and resources, which is more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return.
You said to do the opposite, to eliminate the tiredness or laziness. But I see it in my mind that this will only overload the mind. Am I right here or wrong? Like my sister told me to do something for her and that would take half an hour. Isn't that loading my mind, or it is doing the opposite and it's wise?
And if you're lazy and you're complacent, you would like to do just the opposite. That's the whole reason why.
I'm tired. I don't know.
Hold on. Let me talk, Yusuf. That's your craving, right? When you jump in and you interrupt somebody, that's a craving. So if your mind is lazy and dull and lethargic, that's your mind holding on. So if you continue to do those things, then your mind's not releasing, it's not letting go. So you would like to do just the opposite, which is train your mind to be willing to give and share. And that's what's going to train your mind to practice generosity and eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. If you just stay in the laziness, then that's where the mind's going to reside, and you're just going to dwell in that laziness. So you got to do just the opposite of what the mind wants to do. And that's why the mind continues to be lazy. That's why you haven't been able to eliminate it yet, because you continue to do that. So you're going to need to do something new. You're going to have to let go of this old way of thinking and what the mind's holding on to and do just the opposite.
The funny way that I do to eliminate this laziness is to eat a lot, because eating gives me happiness. So I think it's a good way. But yeah, I know it is not. I will do yours. So yeah.
So what you just described is you're going from one craving to another craving. Right? So you haven't actually solved anything. That if your mind is lazy and dull and lethargic, there's some craving that's producing that. And now if you turn to food, and that's where you're getting your happiness from the food, that's a central desire that the mind's holding on to. And now you've just gone from one craving to another craving, and you haven't actually solved anything.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Okay. I don't see any other questions anywhere, so let's go to the next one, which is chapter 77. All right, Ihan, go ahead, ma'am.
The Noble Giving, Third Discourse. Monk, just as an oil lamp burns in dependency on oil and a wick, and when the oil and wick are used up, if it does not get any more fuel, it is extinguished from lack of fuel. So too, when he feels a feeling terminating with the body, he understands, I feel a feeling terminating with the body. When he feels a feeling terminating with life, he understands, I feel a feeling terminating with life. He understands, on the dissolution of the body, with the ending of life, all that is felt, not being excited in, will become core right here. Therefore, a monk possessing this wisdom possesses the supreme foundation of wisdom. For this monk is the supreme noble wisdom, namely the wisdom of the destruction of all discontentedness. His liberation, being founded upon truth, is unshakable. For that is false, monk, which has a misleading nature, and that is true, which has a non-misleading nature, nibbana, enlightenment. Therefore, a monk possessing this truth possesses the supreme foundation of truth. For this monk is the supreme noble truth, namely nibbana, enlightenment, which has a non-misleading nature. Formerly, when he was unwise, unknowing of true reality, he undertook and accepted material possessions. Now he has abandoned them, cut them off at the root, made them like a palm stump, done away with them so that they are no longer subject to future arising. Therefore, a monk possessing this letting go possesses the supreme foundation of letting go. For this monk is the supreme noble letting go, namely the mentally letting go of all material possessions. Formerly, when he was unwise, unknowing of true reality, he experienced craving, desire, and attachment. Now he has abandoned them, cut them off at the root, made them like a palm stump, done away with them so that they are no longer subject to future arising. Formerly, when he was unwise, unknowing of true reality, he experienced anger, ill will, and hate. Now he has abandoned them, cut them off at the root, made them like a palm stump, done away with them so that they are no longer subject to future arising. Formerly, when he was unwise, unknowing of true reality, he experienced ignorance and delusion. Now he has abandoned them, cut them off at the root, made them like a palm stump, done away with them so that they are no longer subject to future arising. Therefore, a monk possessing this peace possesses the supreme foundation of peace. For this monk is the supreme noble peace, namely the elimination of craving, desire, anger, hatred, and ignorance, delusion. So it was with reference to this that it was said, one should not neglect wisdom, should preserve truth, should cultivate letting go, and should train for peace.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So here the Buddha is explaining that one should cultivate wisdom. That's the ultimate goal. That preserves the truth, that you're able to learn, you're able to intellectually understand, investigate, and examine his teachings. And you're reflecting on them to independently verify each individual aspect. And then you're practicing and training the mind to let go. And this is what trains the mind to experience the peace and the joy. And that's exactly what the Buddha is describing here, eliminating craving, anger, and ignorance, the three poisons or the three unwholesome roots or the three fires. And you need to eliminate them so that they're no longer subject to future arising. That's what the Buddha is describing, is that it's almost like taking a rag and wringing out every last little drop. So don't ever convince yourself that any one of these particular fetters are eliminated from the mind, because as soon as you convince yourself that the game is over, one of them are going to rise their head up and you're going to miss it because you're not paying attention. It's like that game whack-a-mole where you're hitting the moles that are popping their head up. If you think the game's over, you'll put the mallet down, but next thing you know, boom, here comes one popping their head up and you're going to miss it because you don't have the mallet in your hand. So if you stay vigilant and dedicated and diligent, and the Buddha is describing here cultivating the four foundations of mindfulness to a certain degree. That's what he's talking about at the beginning, that if you stay diligent with those four foundations of mindfulness, that whenever you notice a bodily sensation arising associated with craving, desire, attachment, that you cut it off and let it go. If you notice that the mind is experiencing a conditioned feeling, you cut it off and let it go. You need to cut this back closer and closer until you ultimately uproot it out of the mind. Okay, so let me know what questions you guys have here. All right, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So now we'll move to this chapter 78. Go ahead, ma'am.
The path of the teachings surpasses giving. Surely giving is praised in many ways, but the path of the teachings surpasses giving. For in the past and even long ago, the wholesome and wise ones attained nibbana, enlightenment.
Okay, so what the Buddha is talking about here is how, yes, generosity is very important, but he's emphasizing how sharing the teachings surpasses that has generosity embedded in it, that as you're sharing the path to enlightenment and helping people to understand the path to enlightenment, that this is the best thing that you could ever do, is share the teachings that lead to enlightenment. So not everyone who gets to enlightenment is going to be a teacher, but some people will choose to be a teacher. And this will help you in your journey, that if you've decided that you're going to be a teacher, that understand that you're going to be practicing a significant amount of generosity with your students. And that's going to help your practice to help you get closer and closer to enlightenment itself. So while giving is very important and it's highly praised and it's needed in order to even get to the first stage of enlightenment, if you're interested in sharing the teachings, that's another form of generosity in producing merit. Someone who's sharing the teachings, they're practicing generosity, they're also producing a significant amount of merit in the world. And that this is going to lead to one's enlightenment if they're not enlightened yet by the time they actually start sharing the teachings. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this teaching. Okay, just a short one there. So let's move to the next one, which is chapter 79.
To develop a mind of loving kindness is more fruitful than giving. Monks, if someone were to give away 100 pots of food as charity in the morning, 100 pots of food as charity at noon, and 100 pots of food as charity in the evening, and if someone else were to develop a mind of loving kindness, even for the time it takes to pull a cow's udder, either in the morning, at noon, or in the evening, this would be more fruitful than the former. Therefore, monks, you should train yourselves. Thus, we will develop and cultivate the liberation of mind by loving kindness. Make it our vehicle, make it our basis, stabilize it, exercise yourself in it, and fully perfect it. Thus should you train yourself.
Okay, so what the Buddha is describing here is that if there was a choice between practicing generosity and practicing loving kindness, in loving kindness meditation, that you should practice loving kindness. And that's going to be more fruitful than actually practicing generosity. And that's not to diminish how important generosity is, but it's just saying that loving kindness is even more important. The reason why is because the opposite of loving kindness is anger and hatred and ill will. And as long as you've got that in the mind, it's going to come out through your intentions, speech, and actions. And now you're going to be practicing in such a way that you're being hostile and bitter and harsh to other people. And now that's all going to come back to you. So you're putting out harm into the world. So while generosity is putting wholesomeness into the world, if you're at the same time being angry and hateful and bitter, it's actually counteracting and not helping you in the way that loving kindness and loving kindness meditation would. So he's showing you the priority here. So he prioritizes breathing mindfulness meditation. He then prioritizes loving kindness meditation because that's training your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, and loving kindness. He's not sharing that here in this particular discourse, but I'm just sharing with you in the totality of his teachings. He prioritizes breathing mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation, and then after that is improving your moral conduct. And part of that is practicing the generosity. So these are the things that you would like to be doing, which is all detailed in his core central teaching of the Eightfold Path. So that's what you would ultimately like to be learning and growing and developing so that you can train your mind and move it away from causing harm to others. Because as long as you're causing harm to others, it's just going to keep coming back to you. So practicing loving kindness is going to be helping you to accomplish that. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So now we'll go to the last chapter for today. Go ahead, Yihang.
Result of developing and cultivating a mind of loving kindness. Monks, suppose there was a sharp-pointed spear, and a man would come along thinking, I will bend back this sharp-pointed spear with my hand or fist, twist it out of shape, and twirl it around. What do you think, monks? Would it be possible for that man to do so? No, venerable sir. For what reason? Because it is not easy to bend back that sharp-pointed spear with one's hand or fist, to twist it out of shape, or to twirl it around. That man would only experience fatigue and frustration. So too, monks, when a monk has developed and cultivated the liberation of mind by loving kindness, made it a vehicle, made it a basis, stabilized it, exercised himself in it, and fully perfected it. If a non-human being thinks he can overthrow his mind, that non-human being would only experience fatigue and frustration. Therefore, monks, you should train yourselves thus. We will develop and cultivate the liberation of mind by loving kindness. Make it our vehicle, make it our basis, stabilize it, exercise it ourselves in it, and fully perfect it. Thus should you train yourselves.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So here the Buddha is describing the benefits of cultivating loving kindness, and this is just some of them. There's others as well. He's describing that once you cultivate your mind and fully develop it in the mind, that these non-human beings can't invade your mind, like beings in the hell realm or afflicted spirit realm, because those beings are always interested in producing calamity and unwholesome things in the world. They're going to try to influence you in unwholesome ways. But if your mind is protected by loving kindness, you know that it's not wise to go out into the world and cause harm to others. So that's one of the benefits of having practiced loving kindness. You know, there's multiple places in the teachings of the Buddha where you can see that he's teaching you to cultivate loving kindness within your own mind, that loving kindness meditation is not to change other people or send loving kindness to other people, but instead you're exercising your mind in the loving kindness. You're fully developing loving kindness within your mind. This is how you should train your mind. You're not training other people. You're not trying to change other people through your meditation. You're trying to cultivate loving kindness within your own mind, and that's what's going to help you to do that, is the loving kindness meditation. And then you go out into the world and you practice being loving and kind through your intention, speech, and actions. This is what's going to transform your mind away from anger, hatred, ill will, and all the lesser versions like frustration, irritation, annoyance. Even the slightest annoyance or even the slightest dislike is eliminated from the enlightened mind. You won't even dislike another being. You can learn to love and have kindness towards all beings. And it starts with learning the Eightfold Path, and part of that is loving kindness meditation and fully cultivating the mind, but then practicing it through right intention, right speech, and right action in day-to-day life. So this is chapter 80. If you guys have questions on this, let me know by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Okay, it looks like Hella has a question here. Thank you very much for the answers. Why is it that not everyone who reaches enlightenment chooses to be a teacher if it's the highest possible value? What else could they possibly be interested in? So not everybody has the ability to teach or the interest to teach. If everybody was interested in teaching, this would be permanence. And we know the universal truth of impermanence, that there's going to need to be multiple different people in the world doing different things. So because of impermanence, because people have different various interests and goals, they're going to be interested in other things. So an enlightened being could be a politician or a police officer, or a taxi driver, or some other thing, a food server or something like this. Getting to enlightenment means that you've trained your mind and fully developed it, purified it. It's no longer experiencing any discontentedness, but that doesn't mean you have the skills or the ability to share the teachings in the world. Your contribution to the world may be something different. Like I mentioned, you might just really enjoy sweeping streets or serving food or driving a car or a taxi or something like this. So yes, it is one of the best things you could do is to share the teachings, but an enlightened being, even as a nurse, for example, or a taxi driver, they're going to be doing that in a very loving and kind and warm and gentle way as an enlightened being. And other taxi drivers can learn from that. So while they may not be actively teaching like a teacher, like what I'm doing here, they are helping others to be able to understand the teachings through their day-to-day activities. When they go into a store and they're checking out at a cashier and they're being polite, kind, friendly, respectful, for example, other people are taking note of that and realizing like, wow, that's really wise. Or when they're interacting in their community, maybe if they have children and they have children that are going to school, maybe they're interacting with the teachers and the administrators in very loving and kind ways, which is helpful so that those individuals can learn from that as well. So there's multiple ways of teaching, so to speak. But when I talk about teaching, I mean like hanging up a shingle and saying, okay, I'm going to host classes. Not everybody's going to do that. But enlightened beings will typically be helping others to understand the teachings in one way or another, even as a taxi driver or a food server or things like this. So not everyone who attains enlightenment is going to have the ability or the skills or qualifications or the interest even to be an actual teacher. They might have other skills and abilities. Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do is just end class by thanking all of you guys for joining, whether you're joining for the first time or you've been joining regularly. Next week is our last class in this 1.5-year program where I've been guiding students through all the various books of this book series, The Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden. We've gone from volumes 2 all the way through volumes 13, all the individual chapters. I've been teaching this for 1.5 years now, and this is the second time I've taught it. So we're going to start all the way from the beginning. Not that you need to start this program from the beginning, but we will be starting it from the beginning. So it's an ideal time to actually start on July 20th. Volume 2, Chapter 1. And you can read those chapters by downloading the book from our website at buddhadailywisdom.com. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here at the temple in Chiang Mai, or you can order them on Amazon. You can just look up my name, David Roylance, and you'll be able to find all the books. Or you might look for the Words of the Buddha book series. You'll be able to find it that way too. So thank you all for joining for today's class. And if you're interested in joining the future classes, I teach each Saturday for the Pali Canon and English study group at 9 a.m. Thai time and 9 p.m. as well. And then there's the group learning program, which is each Sunday and Wednesday, where I go through volume 1 of this book in a more traditional fashion, where I go chapter by chapter every Sunday. That's a 7-month program to help you develop a foundation in the path to enlightenment. And tomorrow, we're going to be in chapter 12 of volume 1, which is titled Craving is the Problem, What is the Solution? Here I'm going to be teaching you about the Four Noble Truths, which is the very first teaching on the path to enlightenment, and I'm going to discuss the various types of cravings that are potentials in the mind. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to be doing meditation with students and then opening up to any and all questions that you guys might have. So perhaps I'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee krap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.